I was never a fan of country music until I heard this. We've got mountains to climb, right? And in climbing those, the reminder of always be humble and kind, I think, is very profound. You know, this song embodies two very special things. One is, I think, the greatest gift that has ever been given to us is our desiring nature, our dreams that come alive. But that, to me, is the most profound thing that humankind has ever been given. And the other is the idea of, while we're doing all that, to be able to be present to whatever is going on and being humble and kind. Now, I remember a song back in the 90s by Katie Lang. I don't know if any of you remember her, but she had a hit. She won an Emmy for it, and it was called Constant Craving. And it was written in the context of a Buddhist philosophy of and that's called samsara, of the different stages of life. No matter what you're experiencing, you will inevitably experience suffering. And because of our constant craving. And really the characteristics of that craving are really deeply embedded in our Western culture, right? Of having to achieve. Good, better, best, never let it rest. When the good becomes the better becomes the best. I'll say that more slowly. Good, better, best, never let it rest. When the good becomes the better becomes the best. This constant craving to achieve, which inevitably leads to suffering at some level. But that suffering is just for you and me. It's just for you and me. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, "For it is only the finite that has wrought and suffered. The infinite lies stretched in smiling repose." Isn't that beautiful? That's another gift from the universe that we can be thankful for. The universe always wins because the arc of evolution is long, but it bends toward love. That's the intention of this creative process. Now, we may not normally think of that as a gift, or when we're thinking about the season of light, we may not think that way. Usually it's all about Christmas decorations and Christmas lights, which are just fabulous, and traffic jams, right? And wonderful meals with family and friends, and impatient people, and just exhausted customer service people. We think of the gifts as peace on earth, goodwill to all people, and flight delays. Right? These are all gifts of the season. And of course, there's all the presents to open until we run out of presence of mind, right? And that happens too. There's all sorts of gifts if we have the willingness to discover them and to open them. But next to the desiring nature, the constant craving is the greatest gift that's been given to us. I think the second greatest gift is, especially for this season, is the pause. The pause and reflect, right? All the end of the year celebrations really get distilled into the human psyche, going all the way back to the reptilian brain, that when the light started to disappear, there was tremendous fear and worry that it would never come back. And so rituals were created to appease a distant deity, to curry favor in hopes that things would go back to normal, right? And there's still an echo of that with all of our fears around the pandemic, that things get back to normal. But the other part of the celebration was seeing the possibilities in the starlight and the ideas of a new birth and renewal. Now, we still give some superficial recognition of these of these celebrations, but I think the pause and reflect is something that at least we here and many other devout people really take seriously, because it brings up, the end of the year, that it's an opportunity to integrate everything that we've learned over the course of the year, everything that we've learned over these 2 years of the pandemic, to really leverage that, to find the gifts in that, to find the meaning in all that uncertainty and doubt and worry and fear and all of those other things that are going on. So the question is, well, how do we integrate that into our lives? Well, I'm a pretty simple and linear guy. And the way that I understand to integrate is to make a list. Make a list. You have accomplished more this year than you can really imagine. If you've got a journal, that's helpful because you can go back and read through your journal and start making a list of all the decisions you've made, all the places that you've gone, all the people that you've seen, all the great things that you experienced, those wonderful intimate moments of peace and joy and all of those things. And at the same time, make a list of the things that didn't go so well. The sorrows and the disappointments, the upsets, all of the things that you can look at and maybe wish that they hadn't happened. So you're making 2 lists here. The list of accomplishments and things that you've done, and the things that didn't go so well. Because what you want to do is to look at those things, and maybe there's a pattern that you can discover in each of them that may be a gift, of a real understanding of, oh yeah, that's what happened. These are the gifts of the season, the gifts of the seasons of our life. Because we really just need to have the courage and make the time to take a look at that, or not. Because time, Joel Goldsmith has a book called The Parenthesis in Eternity. You know what they put on your gravestone? From here to here. That's all we have to really recognize who we have come here to be. I love the end of the video where they show that young lady metamorphosing through the stages and seasons of her life all the way to the end. Imagine if we could really dive deep into the seasons of our life and find all the wonderful gifts that are embedded there. Do we want to take the time to do that? Imagine if, starting now, you made a habit of doing that, of taking a look at both the conscious and unconscious use of the creative process to discover those gifts in our lives and begin to harvest all of those gifts. Now, 32 years ago, I was a very young man. In October of 1989, my divorce became finalized. I'd been married for 14 years. In November, my business that I had started collapsed. And in December, 32 years ago this week, my dad had a heart attack from shoveling snow and passed. So in 3 months, that was what my life had become. And as you can imagine, that had to be pretty traumatic. And so I did the work around all of that, writing forgiveness letters and getting my anger out and all that. But even now, I can hear a song or see Christmas lights or something, and it will still trigger a twinge of sadness or anger or whatever. You see, even when we do that forgiveness work, it doesn't necessarily go away, but maybe it's diminished. And I'm grateful for that memory, because here's the thing. If that didn't happen, I wouldn't be here now. I would not be here now. I would not have been introduced to the science of mind. I would not have met my wife, had a child, and had a spiritual community for 26 years. So what I did is to reframe those circumstances, recontextualize it in terms of looking at what are the patterns here that I see. And I found some. I found a pattern of giving my power away to other people, of trying to please people, of trying to be a second-rate version of somebody else. But I also discovered that there was a drive, a determination for personal growth. And that was a huge gift to discover. You see, we have to do the work to get to that place. Now, that determination for personal growth, what I discovered and remembered is that it had started very early on. You know how we have our high school pictures, and we have the saying underneath the high school pictures? Well, mine was from Robert Browning's poem, Andrea del Sarto. And he said there, a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? I was very idealistic, but even then, that was a subconscious drive in me to find some greater meaning in life. And all of those gifts were beyond anything I could have imagined would ever happen to me. And not to say that it was easy from there. I had just started a consulting business and being in ministry with my wife, and we were living, when we first started out, paycheck to paycheck, which meant that there was more month than money at the end of the month. And we would often have cupboards that were pretty bare and empty refrigerator. But because I had done that work, and it was imprinted on me to reframe, Kath and I developed a process that we called Lobes and Fishes. Now, if you know what Loaves and Fishes are, Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was there with millions of people, and all they had to eat for lunch was some fish and a few loaves, and he blessed it, and suddenly there was enough food for everybody. Well, what we did is scrounge around and, find a can of this here and that there, and the funny thing is, miraculously, we always had leftovers by doing the work. So no matter where you are in your spiritual journey, it's okay, no matter what's going on. We are all spiritual beings having a human experience. We've heard that before, right? But in this center, in this community, we're here to support one another on that journey because we're making it together. And we can't grow spiritually until we integrate into a community that compels us to grow spiritually. That's what this is about. We're all here to support one another and to be compelled to do better, to do more. It's that constant craving, but in a spiritual sense of realizing who we have come here to be. Now, one of the things that we say, and sometimes it's tossed off in terms of, struggling with the past, we say principle is not bound by precedent, right? Have you heard that before? Do you know what it means? It means there's a power and presence greater than we are that we can use to change our lives no matter what has happened in the past. Now, unfortunately, what I've seen is a misuse of that principle because it's transformed into hope, right? I hope I get this job. I hope I get the guy. I hope I get the girl. I hope I get the house. Fill in the blank. I hope, I hope, I hope. And it can get very addictive. And what happens is we turn principle into a habit of smoking the hopium pipe. Right? It becomes addictive. So I can remember doing treatment for a person, in a session, and it happened more than once, where we'd have, they'd tell me what was going on, I asked them what they want, And we do a beautiful treatment, and sometimes, they'd start crying. And so I knew that, it was making an impact on them. And then as we get up, they'd say, well, I hope that works. And I'd say, get your butt back in the seat, because we're not done. Because there's no sense of conviction there. There was conviction on my part, but not theirs. And so that's all we can do. So if you've been smoking the hopium pipe and bypassing working on precedent, working on your past, then you can miss all of these wonderful gifts of the season. People don't become sages simply by living to a very old age, right? They become wise by understanding that the spiritual work that we do leads to an expansion of consciousness, or leads to an expansion of understanding the stages of an expanded consciousness. So the questions are, do you know what your limiting beliefs are? Well, maybe you have a vague idea. So what does Reverend John say to do? Make a list. Make a list of all those mental constructs that you hold in your head about how life is supposed to be, right? We should be experiencing this. We should not have to suffer this way. You should know what I mean. We've been together for 30 years, all of those things. Now, in a book called The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, a young man named Vishen Lakhiani, who founded Mind Valley, if you've ever heard of that, he talks about rules, B-R-U-L-E-S, that govern our lives. Rules that govern our lives. What that means is the BS rules that we live by, right? So we have all of these concepts that have been handed down generation to generation, like you only get married to someone in your own race or religion, right? That's one that is probably not as current as it was, but it's still there. The rules about the roles that you have as a parent or in a relationship, the rules about divorce, about your career, about parenting, all these rules that we've just unconsciously accepted. And my favorite is our rules around old age. And I want to get back to that one in a little bit. You see, if we can take the time to recognize those patterns in our lives, the gifts of the season that cause us to change, it raises our awareness of the needed growth that we have to have in order to get what it is that we say that we want. Now, if you're familiar with Abraham Hicks, they talk about what do they call it? Vibrational escrow, right? The vortex of the possibilities of what we've been dreaming about, like in the video. The place of the in-between, from where that rocket of desire is launched and the demonstration of that desire is fulfilled, right? In between is the vortex. The gifts of the season are in those patterns that we have to recognize in order to accelerate the demonstration of what we say we want. That's where the work needs to be done. Is that making sense? We don't return to the past to punish ourselves or to relive the experience. We go there simply to reframe the mistakes and the failures and whatever we want to call them, to find those nuggets of unexpected success and wisdom that are there. So I want to get back to that part about old people. Our youth culture does not in any way recognize the value of growing old. We are not condemned to a waning physical and mental or a waning of our powers, physically and mentally, or being socially isolated. We're not condemned to that. So there's a book, and I've mentioned it before. It's called Aging to Saging, and let me read the guy's name. It's Rabbi Zalom Schachter Shalomi with Ronald Miller. And they wrote this book, and they have this to say, if I can pull it up on my phone. Okay. Contrary to conventional thinking, aging is a great success, a result of strength and survivorship. Aging doesn't mean diminishment or exile from the ranks of the living. As the period in which we harvest the fruits of a lifetime's labor, it gives a panoramic vision from which spiritual wisdom flows. Like mountain climbers, mountains to climb, who have scaled a high peak, we have achieved a vantage point in old age from which to observe the path of our ascent and to appreciate the personality that we have created with discipline and devotion. We can survey the struggles for career, marriage, and financial security that occupied much of our time and see why they were all so necessary. Putting the puzzle pieces together, we can glimpse the large patterns that crown our lives with deeper meaning. To you who stand triumphantly at the summit, I say, you made it. And to you who are still climbing the mountain of life's promises, I say in all sincerity, keep climbing. You have so much to look forward to. Those are the gifts of the seasons if we take the time to harvest them. If we do this inner work and hold up a different paradigm of aging, of vibrant health and vitality, of willingness to learn and experience new adventures, the opportunities just expand for what is possible for us as we age. Now, we talked about the gifts of precedent, of the past. And I want to talk a little bit about the gifts of principle. The gifts of principle require a deeper dive into our understanding of who we have come here to be and our relationship with God, whatever we call it. Now, if God is a being for you, that's okay. Because people of all faith traditions that believe in a God or a goddess in the sky, hoping to reward us in the sweet beyond, they're still doing tremendous work. I mean, if they're really devout and following their beliefs, they're doing tremendous work, and they're bending that arc of the evolution of consciousness to love. They're practicing being humble and kind. And that's all that matters. For me, my belief is that God is not a being. God is being it. God is being it. Being the aspects of God like light, love, power, peace, beauty, joy. And I find when I reframe whatever is happening in my life in terms of that, everything necessary to the full and complete expression of who I have come here to be is added. All my needs are met. And that's where we really discover who we have come here to be. You know, the greatest gift that you can give yourself is doing this kind of work, of solidifying your place in the cosmos by understanding your relationship to the thing that you call God, universe, goddess, whatever you want to call it. Solidifying your place in understanding who you are in that framework. It is getting our bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits that simply want us to express and experience the best that life has to offer us. And the deep realization that the universe always has our back. Can we really believe that? No matter what is going on, the universe has our back. So when you do this kind of work, and only when you do this kind of work, can you give a gift to the other, to someone else, by seeing them in that same way that you see yourself. seeing them in the light and the beauty and the embrace of spirit. Because if you can do that, everything else changes. Everything changes. Because together we have mountains to climb. And always remembering to climb them by being humble and kind. And so it is. Thank you. So I'd like to end with a slide before you run away, John. And let's say this together. Such is the power of right thinking that it cancels and erases everything unlike itself. It answers every question, solves all problems, is the solution to every difficulty. It is like the sunshine of eternal truth bursting through the clouds of obscurity and bathing all life in a celestial glory. It is the absolute with which we are dealing and nothing less. And so it is. And that picture is from Point Joe at Asilomar. Wow. Thank you so much.